Good morning and welcome to a Sunday live edition of the Average Joe Sports Show. Elijah Herbel joined by Gary Sharp and Bill Doleman. Chris Schmidt will be checking in at some point here this morning from, I believe he's now in Georgia, I think, maybe South Carolina, one of the two. He's going to be joining us from the golf course here in roughly 30 minutes. But
I hope it's Augusta with a card table and a Marty unit, and they look at him like he's a mirage.
Hey, I think he said yesterday, isn't he in Columbia? So he would be in the home of the Gamecocks when they're playing for the national championship today in women's hoops.
There you go.
Do you think has sent a picture to us via Twitter of him on looks like the putting green?
Do you think that so Columbia, which might be in the summer one of the hottest places in the world because you can't go like to the beach, you're kind of landlocked. Mm-hmm. I think it's the entertainment district. I've been there twice. I think it's called 5 Points. I would highly recommend Schmidt, blow off the Masters tomorrow and go and celebrate another USC women's national championship and in 5 Points.
Yeah, I'm sure that's on the agenda of things to do. Getting a bunch of Let's Go Cox sweatshirts, foregoing what everybody asked him to buy at Augusta.
The real USC.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's a big assumption to think South Carolina is going to win that one. Is this not a bit of the team of destiny with UConn? I know it's the other Final Four. I mean,
if Paige Beckers is going to have. If Paige Beckers is going to have a legacy at UConn, she has to win the national championship. But Dawn Staley is playing it up as though her team is, oh, woe was me because Paige Beckers is getting all of the attention. There you go. That's all I know about the women's tournament.
Yeah, no. I mean, all the attention's on the boys' side last night for good reason. I can't remember two more compelling games in a Final Four with that high level of play. I don't have them all encyclopedia memory of the Final Fours past, but to see those four teams play the way that they did and to fall into the traps of the teams that won. I even thought the officiating was good last night. I thought that was I don't think this has been a great NCAA tournament after Omaha got beat, but I think for the way the Final Four played out yesterday, that has saved the tournament for the most part.
I like teams that are really good. I mean, Cinderellas are. It's not like that we've just been bombarded by Cinderellas. We got spoiled a couple of years ago with San Diego State and Florida Atlantic. And we want the best to play, and we get all 4 number 1 seeds, and they delivered yesterday. I didn't think in the Auburn-Florida game the officiating was very good. Then in the nightcap, I didn't have a problem with the foul on Flagg.
I didn't either.
I'd been talking on my show about Houston all week because Houston's path to get here was the toughest of the other 3 number 1 seeds and who they had to beat. But everybody was looking at Duke, and rightfully so. Duke's a really, really good team, but against really, really good competition, which they didn't face on an annual basis in the ACC. They were only 5-4 against Ken Pom top 25 teams. The one thing about Houston, and this is a direct reflection of their head coach, is you got to put a toe tag on them. I mean, they're tough. You can't just throw a punch and hope they're going to back down. Now, I think 2 things are true about that game last night. Duke completely choked it away, and Houston was resilient. And Houston had an opening, and they hung around. They didn't panic. They're an older team. Duke is a younger team. Duke had some flaws that have been there all season long, but they find a way at the end of games to make plays. They got exposed last night, and it was 2 great games. It was great for the sport. I think we'll have a very compelling final between Houston and Florida. But if you're Duke, like how long does it take to get over a loss like that last night if you're Duke?
It's going to get worse.
I mean,
I'm going to say this. And I would advise Cooper Flagg, now that you can make $10 million in Durham next year, why not stick around and play another year of college basketball? But anyway, when that announcement is made that he is going to the NBA, if he hasn't already, it's going to be another kick in the Southern Hemisphere to them because I thought that was one of the best Duke teams I've ever seen.
Well, talent-wise, they were the more talented team last night, but
by far,
Houston was more mature, and Houston had the better head coach. I mean, hats off to Kelvin Sampson, the in-game adjustments he made last night, also exploiting the fact that, I mean, Duke, what are they doing on an inbounds play there at the end? Like chickens with their heads cut off running around out there on the floor. That's what it looked like from Duke. I mean, Houston exploited that. That was a fantastic comeback, and it comes down to their maturity, and it comes down to their head coach. That was the difference last night, because they were not the more talented team. That Duke team, as you say, Bill, one of the most talented Duke teams I've seen probably in my lifetime.
Here's a couple things. I've said this many times on the shows over the years, and Gary, you've seen a million coaches too. I've always said Kelvin Sampson is the best coach I have ever seen at work. Of all the coaches that I've been around and been blessed to be around, watching him on a Friday conduct a walkthrough with his team or a Thursday afternoon practice is, I mean, you just want to watch. You don't want to sit there and talk to your partner. It's really an amazing case study in how disciplined he is, how disciplined his team has to be in practice, but they're also very physical. They're very rugged. And when that game fell into that kind of ugly style of basketball to where the last 3 minutes, when they had to fight just to get in it, that was indicative of all the discipline that he instills in his team. So I felt really, I mean, I've always liked him. He's not the most genial of coaches. It's not like Eddie Sutton or somebody, Johnny Orr back in the day, or Danny Nee. But man, you just respect the way he coaches his teams. And that Houston team in those final 10 minutes, but really the final 3 minutes was really a microcosm of everything he still instills into his team. And they were just, the University of Houston isn't exactly located in the Woodlands or out in Katy. I mean, it's in a rough part of town, and it's certainly a little different than Durham. And that personified the neighborhood, their coach, everything. And if they can do that again on Monday night, they can beat Florida. Florida's probably more athletic, but are they as tough and as resilient and as mentally tough is that Houston team? Because they didn't fold when they should have, and most teams would.
Yeah, I imagine a Houston practices 3 hours of suicides and just beating the crap out of each other. I mean, they're a tough team to play, because not many teams play that style where they're all over you. But Duke did a better job of being Houston, I thought, early in that game. But late in the game, it came down to coaching. So it's 67-61, and Duke's got the ball. And what does Houston do? They don't foul. They let it play out. They don't turn it into a free throw shooting contest. And I thought that was really a wise move. Now, in a make or miss sport, the end for Duke with Flagg, that's a good look. But in tight games, and Duke hasn't been in a lot of them this year, that's a familiar play. Hey, let's just get it to number 2 and get out the way. And Houston everybody knew that number 2 was going to touch the basketball. Now, our conversation is different if he makes it this morning, but I just thought as the game got tight, the freshmen showed up and the veterans showed up. And the team that had the veterans won the game. And Kelvin Sampson had a really good handle on his team. They were down 6 in overtime in Lawrence with 9 seconds to go and won the game. So they are used to playing in those kind of games, and they didn't panic. And there were a lot of times they could have panicked much, much earlier before they ever got to 3 minutes to go, because they were starting to hit shots, but they could never make up any ground. But it's a hell of a resilience for Houston, and I'm a huge fan of Kelvin Sampson. I think he's one of the genuine guys. He kind of got railroaded at Indiana, but he has been in it. He's suffered a lot of heartbreak, and he's one of the good guys in the business that does a lot of things away from the basketball floor to benefit young coaches or his community. When Houston was devastated by the Hurricanes, remember he had everybody in the country in basketball programs donate shoes so that he could distribute them in the Houston area. I mean, it's going to be a fun game. It's 2 contrasting styles. It's 2 teams that have found their way to the end. And I can't wait to talk to Garth about the SEC and their place, because we have the SEC and the Big 12, arguably the 2 best conferences in college basketball this year. And I can't wait.
Now, I don't mean to take away from Florida here, but just to piggyback on what you said about Kelvin Sampson, one of the good guys, 100%. And there's been a video going around this week. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. That was Kelvin Sampson in 2016 on Houston's campus. He had just taken the job. They could barely get any fans into the stands, and he's going around to students on campus, stopping by the union, stopping by all the dining halls, stopping by classes, and he's handing out free tickets to students saying, are you coming to the game tonight? Are you coming to the game tonight? And people weren't coming to the game back in 2016. Now you look, in Houston's one of the most attended college basketball programs in the country. Their fan base shows up. They're rabid. I mean, you heard them last night, how many Houston fans made that short trip over to San Antonio. Like, the way that he has built that program from the ground up, from nothing to a national title contender, is nothing short of amazing. So I picked him in my bracket, but I'm still going to be rooting for Houston in the Final Four, even if I didn't, because of Kelvin Sampson. He's that good. Really enjoy him as just watching what he does at Houston.
Well, look, there's a little money down there too, and he tapped into the right spigot. He got Tillman Fertitta involved in that program, and Tillman Fertitta owns the Houston Rockets and a lot of other things. And there's a lot. That's an untapped place. I've been down there twice. I did a lot of Houston Cougar stuff back in the late 90s, early 2000, and then being down there a decade ago. They found the right guy to press the right flesh, and there was money in that handshake. So good on him. They redid Hoffein's Pavilion, so it kind of made it a place to go. It's not quite as expensive as it is to go to see a Houston Rockets game, right? So, and Kelvin had been an assistant coach to Kevin McHale with the Rockets at the same time I was down there. So, he was ingrained in that community already when he got the job. So it's all fallen into place. Now, can they do one more? There's a lot of people going back to Villanova or North Carolina State in 1983, hoping that all the rights or the wrongs are righted on Monday night. One thing about Duke, real quick, is we're at Augusta. This is Augusta. I can tell that right now.
Oh, listen to that shot.
Yeah,
nice
I can
ball.
tell that's not Schmidt taking the swing, though. Are you in Augusta? Is that Amen Corner?
No, this is
okay.
Edgewater. We are outside of Columbia, South Carolina. There's a lake that I will find at about the 8th shot, and away we go. I'm supposed to tee off here shortly.
Hey, when Schmitty's on the tee box, every hole is Amen Corner, right?
Praying.
When do you arrive in Augusta? Oh, shh. Quiet.
Nice shot there. We get to Augusta tonight. I'm going to hand you off to Iowa Russ real quick.
Oh, okay.
You're fine, aren't you?
So Iowa Russ is in.
You guys seen the George Bush video where it's like, now watch this drive? That's what Schmitty just did to us.
Yeah.
Schmitty, we're going to get a live shot here of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, he did really well. Did really well on Friday, but that was with an iron. This is with the driver, and I've seen Schmitty's driver. You never know.
We got 3 in the fairway, about 150 out. We got Schmidt here.
Schmitty, I'm ready to take you as the wolf.
This is a serious show.
Yeah, exactly.
This is going right into the trees.
Oh,
Hey, down the middle.
Yeah.
Down the middle.
Yeah, well, the ladies teased her down the middle, too, so.
Sounded like you buried the club before contact, so
That's what
nice
I thought.
shot.
It's a Schmidt tradition, yes.
Did you bounce that?
Well, maybe, but it's in the middle.
You got a fatty in there? So you got a fatty in there as well at 11:30 in the morning?
Had one in at 6:30 this morning. So. You would think, and kids don't chew, you would think that being on Tobacco Road, it'd be a little more affordable down here. It is not when it comes to the addictive substances. So,
we do need to quickly get your thoughts on the Houston game last night. I know
I couldn't believe it. We walked in where we watched the final 15 minutes, said, Otis, my man. And
You're at the Dexter Lake Club.
A little bit. And no, it was incredible how they just hung tight, especially after the technical foul as Kelvin collapsed. And they just found a way. Their pressure, their defense, their intensity, their belief was incredible. They didn't blink. I didn't know if anyone was going to break 50 the way the first half was going. I got a hit here. Hang tight. Say hi to Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Hello.
Jason is in.
Well, let's quickly take you through our Average Joe Sports Show starting five. Corn Raider was in first this morning. Uncle Larry was in second. Justin in as well. Eat Beef in at 8:30. Schmidt shot, not great. Not great. Captain in. The other Dave. Steve is in. Coach Brandon, Tuck, Charles, Colby, the usual suspects, as well as member of the Boulder Peace Treaty, Brian Snitley, with us, saying if we can get a sweep and a crown victory today. That's what Brian asks. And there's your Average Joe Sports Show starting five on a Sunday. Schmitty, what do we think of that shot?
Oh, it's pissed. It's bad. Horrible. But no, Houston was great. I thought Matt Rule was informative yesterday, and I haven't lost any golf balls today, so I'm a happy guy. We get to Augusta tonight, though, and stay over, and then we're going to hit the front gates about 7 tomorrow morning. Be there all day with rain gear likely. So,
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see.
Well, for those who don't know, Schmitty's on his bucket list trip down to Augusta. 15 years of waiting for Iowa Russ. Is that who got the passes? Iowa Russ has been trying for 15 years to get the passes to go, and they got practice round passes for tomorrow. So Chris played a couple days ago in Charlotte, and had a nice approach shot from 75 out, put it on the green, then 3-putted live on the air. And now he's playing out of the trees with a ball that he dropped out of the hole in his pocket. So that's what's going on. That's the update.
And with Schmitty going to Augusta tomorrow, get your orders in for the Augusta Pro Shop. You want Masters?
That's right.
Get your orders in. Size, polos, whatever you want.
I think it's bad. I'm going to mark that bastard up. I got my own tariff going. All right, I got to hit. I'll check back in 15 minutes, fellas.
All right.
Thanks,
See you
Schmitty.
later. So getting back to the Final Four, let me tie this into Nebraska for a second. So Duke's incredibly talented, and I'm watching this, and they score one basket in the last 10 minutes of the game. They blow a 6-point lead in the last 30 seconds. They've not been in that situation, right? Pretty much all season. They had like 2 games that were less than 2 possessions or something like that. They just rolled through everybody other than the couple of losses they had early in the season. It reminded me a bit of watching Nebraska volleyball, because Nebraska volleyball goes through its regular season, and for the most part, they've got a couple of battles in the Big Ten, and then they get to that NCAA tournament stage, and they've not gone through, some tough times where they've had to fight back. And I think we've seen that in the last, couple of trips to the Final Four, that they've been so good, so dominant in the regular season that when it comes time to, having to fight through some adversity that they haven't experienced, they come up a little bit short. And as I'm watching Duke last night, yeah, they've got great players. I think they're the most athletic team in the tournament. I think, like I said, I think it's one of the best Duke teams I've seen in however many years I've been watching college basketball. But when it came time to adversity, they're looking at the end of the game, and justifiably so, he's the player of the year, but they're looking to a freshman to make that shot. And, there were no other Jimmy Chitwoods apparently that John Schreier felt comfortable with going. I mean, Houston knew it was going to Cooper Flagg, and that's why they put Jawan Roberts on him, the 6th-year senior. Not even their best defensive player, great one, but not their best one. But in an adverse moment, as you have steamrolled through, and they were so confident that they were going to win it, when it came time in a difficult moment, they couldn't rise to the occasion. Not just in that last shot, but over the last 10 minutes of the game. And I see that. It got me thinking about Nebraska volleyball, how dominant they are. And it's almost like a team would be better being 25-7 than 33-2.
Yeah. There's that other game that was played before it, which sets up for an intriguing Final Four. I think coaching mattered yesterday. Like, look at Todd Golden, who, not even 40 years old. And he's been 3 years at Florida. He's only been a Division I head basketball coach for 6 years. What they did, and Auburn looked like they were tired.
Yes.
Florida didn't change. Like, When Florida, in the first half, coming out to the second half, Florida never changed. Like, they didn't make adjustments. It's like, let's just stick with this because we can see that Broom is not 100%. And we're not going to double team him, which seems odd. He's the National Player of the Year. But they also didn't change what they were doing defensively. And Auburn looked really, really tired. And Florida ran them up and down the floor. And that game felt like a Big East game, like old Big East, like where every time you had the ball, there was a hand on you. Every time you got to the rim, it was going to be contested. And I thought Florida was the tougher team in that game. And then, of course, they had a star. I mean, we may not have the Cinderellas, but you know what we might have, guys? We might have the Cinderellas are actually players. Like Walter Clayton Jr. was at Iona. He came out of high school. He didn't have any stars. He wasn't doing much at Iona. And then he started to move up. And now on this stage, people are talking about him as being a lottery pick. So when their stars needed to be stars, they were stars. You know, when Duke needed somebody to be a star other than Flagg at the end of the game last night, they just weren't there. So I think the Florida-Houston matchup is going to be a really, really good matchup. Two really good teams, two styles that are kind of similar. Florida would like to open it up a bit. Houston would like to drag you into the mud. But I think there's a veteran coach and a younger coach that are pretty good in their business right now. So we may not have gotten all the excitement of the first 2 weeks. I think we're going to get a great Saturday, and I hope a great Monday night.
I got a quick bone to pick with the Florida-Auburn game because I was on the baseball diamond yesterday. First game, I'm behind the plate. Second game, I'm in the field. I planned it out well, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to find somebody to give me some Final Four updates. So it's about end of the first inning, maybe middle of the second inning, and I go to my water bottle, which is down the right field line, and there were some varsity players. It was the JV game too. Mm-hmm. There's some varsity players sitting at the right field line next to my water bottle. I go, hey, next time I'm over here, would you guys mind giving me a score update from that Auburn-Florida game? They go, yeah, no problem. We got you. I jog back out to the field, and that next half inning, those guys book it down the right field line away from my water bottle. I didn't get any updates all game. So I asked for the update, and they're like, yeah, sure, we got you. And then they get the hell out of there. They go, I'm not giving this umpire any scoreboard updates. So my knowledge of that game is based on the highlights that I saw, but looked like a fantastic basketball game.
Yeah, the reason I liked the officiating yesterday is that, there was some questionable stuff, but I thought they let him play. There were a couple calls missed, and you can argue the flag thing. I think that was a foul. They're always going to call that. You reach over the back like that, they're always going to call that. But I thought there was some physicality that they allowed, to take place without every touch being a foul. I thought they stepped away from it a little bit, which I thought was really good, and it was consistent throughout. Whether there were bad calls or not, it was at least rugged. If you want to go back in time again to Houston in 1983 and Clyde Drexler picks up like 3 fouls in the first 5 minutes of that game against North Carolina State. And the third foul is when he basically fell down and they called him for blocking. So that decided that game. So I thought it was a good, rugged, physical style of play in both games. And I'm hoping that's what we have on Monday night. And if that's the case, that might favor Houston if the whistle doesn't get blown quite so much and the officials don't try to be part of the show. But I thought it was consistent. That's what I appreciated about the officiating.
I can't wait for more replay reviews. I can't wait for more guys in striped shirts looking into a monitor. I hope in the off season they go to coaches' challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
It works well with
I had a friend only in the TV business though. Can you have somebody post something saying, I really like the use of the jib cam on the referees on the referees reviews. I mean, that was a TV buddy of mine noticing that.
Hey, we got the ultimate because in the Auburn Florida game, we had an extended period of time where we blew right by the under 16 media timeout because there were no stoppages, and we're inching into the under 12 media timeout. So we had for the first, I can never recall this, a timeout in the middle of 2 free throws for TV purposes.
And didn't the second game begin like 40 minutes after the scheduled time?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the first game didn't go to OT. And they were 40 minutes behind time.
It was a great showcase, I thought, for the sport yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, we were trying to debate whether if Flagg wins a national title, is he the best one and done guy? I don't know. Carmelo Anthony, that's to me the best freshman that's played college basketball in the last 25, 30 years. But Cooper Flagg's going to be a great player in the NBA. but we got to make sure that he is not going to Washington, Utah, or Charlotte.
Which okay, that begs the question: why not stay? You could probably make. I mean, if somebody at BYU is making $7 million, why can't somebody at Duke? I think they got money there.
They got dark money.
Yeah, why couldn't somebody? And we've known that probably for the last 40 years, but that's another story for another time. Why not drop $10 million in his lap and say, we would sure love for you to stick around and play another year at Duke? Why not? How much more is he going to make in the NBA?
Now, it would be great for the sport to have like a Cooper Flagg come back next year, but I don't know. Does he go, I've done as much as I can in college outside of winning a title, and now it's time to go and play with the big boys and make some money?
Right, but if you could do that, but now you can make money here and win one with your teammates and come back to Duke for one more season. That's the difference. And back in the day, it would be like, well, to do it for dear old Duke U, they don't have to do that anymore. You can get the money, put it in your pocket, and stick around and play 40 games instead of 82. Granted, you got to go to econ, 250 and poli sci 342, but why not? $10 million. I bet somebody's going to say, why not stay?
Hey, I'm not opposed to it because I think it would help the college game, but I don't envision a scenario. I envision the scenario of somebody saying, hey, what would it take to keep you here? But then I also envision the scenario of you're the number one pick and you've been the number one pick since you were in high school. And I can't imagine, he went to a prep school last year, but I can't imagine what he was doing in the state of Maine in high school to those kids. I mean, what was Cooper Flagg as a junior in high school doing, or a sophomore in high school doing?
Imagine finishing up in math class and you got to go guard Cooper Flagg after school.
And the other thing about him is he should be in high school. He's got a twin brother who is a senior. He reclassified. He should be playing at Montverde, against other prep schools or at as high school in Maine. But yet he's doing what he did in college basketball this year. He's one of the best college basketball players I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
And, if you're thinking of one and done guys, Bill, isn't Cooper Flagg had more of an impact than Zion? Even though Zion got more attention probably during his career at Duke than Flagg did?
Well, and remember, Zion got hurt when he blew out his shoe, and they said he should shut it down and not play anymore until he gets drafted. And then he goes to the NBA and gets exiled in New Orleans and has exiled himself to the buffet and has not been the player that they expected him to be.
Quietly, he's had a pretty good year this year.
Finally, though, look, when I was working with the Rocket stuff, the amount of time when you would see teams that were giving extra attention to their 18, 19-year-old draft picks, they just were not ready to play. And they'd come in there and they'd shoot around, and then they'd have the kid out there with an assistant coach who was, giving one-on-one tutorial on how to make a drop step pivot against, somebody who's 32 years old and weighs 280 pounds and has been in the league. Zion Williamson would have benefited greatly from playing another year in college. All those guys who go early would benefit taking another year and maturing and then understanding the college game at a high level and then move on, as opposed to now Kobe Bryant's an exception. But I think for Cooper Flagg, plus if I look at, where I might go and do I want to get exiled to the Washington Wizards, or it's not just about the city and the market. It's also about the organization and how well it's run. Mm-hmm. And you can be a high draft pick and you go into a poorly run organization and you're just going to flounder and get lost. And sometimes they help resurrect a franchise, but for the most part, you want to get into the right place at the right time. And if I look at those three teams and say, is that where I'm going to go? And is that where I want to be? Maybe not.
The flip side of it is if Cooper Flagg goes now, it knocks 1 year off of playing for some terrible team before he can inevitably go leave in free agency and sign for the Lakers or some good big market team. So there's the one positive. I'm with you. I think it'd be good for college basketball. Cooper Flagg stayed. That's the big hope for me. I think either way, he's going to make good money. I mean, it's an injury risk to stay at Duke, but it's an injury risk to go off to the NBA as well. Like, to me, there's going to be money to be made for Cooper Flagg no matter what happens. I think it'd just be good for the sport of college basketball for him to come back and for Duke to try and make another run next year. With as young as that team is, it'd be a lot of fun to watch that team next year. And that's my take on it. But whatever he does, he's going to go be successful in doing. He's going to be fantastic in the NBA, or he's going to be fantastic if he comes back for another year at Duke.
Or maybe they get his brother to come play at Duke too. What's his brother's name? Ace?
Yes. And he's going to stay in state and go to Maine
for a couple of years and then transfer someplace else.
Yeah. Well, did you it was the awkward, and I think Ian Eagle is fantastic. It was the awkwardness last night when they started to talk about his brother, and they're like, yeah, his brother's still in high school. And there was like a pause, and people are like going, okay, wait a minute. They're twins. Cooper's in college. Ace is a senior. How's that work? And then he said, he reclassified.
I thought you were going to go with the Ian Eagle moment where he said it was Cooper Flagg got the and one, and he says Cooper Flagg at full mast.
Now that was pretty good.
And I went, whoa.
Bill, you've been at kind of that level in this business. I think it's impressive, and maybe it shouldn't surprise anyone because they're two incredible announcers, that CBS, with the most important thing they do all year, even greater than the Masters, has had a seamless transition from Jim Nantz to Ian Eagle.
Yeah, I was surprised that Ian Eagle was the guy who got the gig. He's a Bill Raftery guy from way back. It was connections, from what I understand, with Bill Raftery that got him involved in the NBA and making the upper echelon of announcing in the New York area. He's understatedly funny. I would love to if they had been Kevin Harlan. I think everybody probably would have. But look, the thing about Ian Eagle is he stays away from being the show. I think Jim Nantz did a pretty good job of that. Although, boy, the love Jim Nantz gets to these days is if the president's coming back whenever he enters the arena. But yeah, Ian Eagle's done a great job, and he's good chemistry with those guys. And Raftery's a freaking gem. Dropping the Willie Mosconi line last night was probably generational to about 5% of the viewing public who remembers who Willie Mosconi is. But yeah, they've had a great transition to him.
We could also talk about Gus Johnson finding every opportunity to talk about Dylan Raiola during a Husker basketball game. Every opportunity he can. Man, I'm excited for those Huskers.
Yeah. Is he on the call today at the Crown?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, Gus is even in the little promo video he shot on Twitter and Instagram for Husker basketball. He's talking about the Husker basketball team excited, and I'm excited this fall to go see Dylan Raiola. I think they're gonna be special. Like, I love Gus Johnson, don't get me wrong, but his care level for the Crown seems to be absolutely nothing.
Yeah. This is how it should be treated. First of all, I will be making no prediction. I thought Boise State would blow out Nebraska. I was completely wrong. Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield. I was pleasantly surprised yesterday because Nebraska played really well. And it is, and I think, at least I have been this way, is I'm just enjoying this for the fun. It doesn't change my opinion on the regular season. It's kind of a little frustrating that it took them 3 weeks to reset and play like I think they're capable of playing, but that's beside the point. What happened in the regular season in the past, this is just fun. Guys are going to make some cash. You can tell that they're clearly prepared. I just thought Boise State would be the better team because Boise State looked really, really good. So that Nebraska played well yesterday. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's one of Nebraska's better wins of the season, which I didn't see coming. I thought they'd get crushed. I don't know what's going to happen today, but it's fun. You know what? I think we've all treated the Crown like it should be. It's great for the team. Okay. They get to enjoy this, but it doesn't change what happened 3 weeks before this tournament started. Not to make the tournament, to finish the year losing 5 in a row. Not going to change my opinion on the season, but it's good for the guys in the program. They get to play and they get to celebrate and they get some cash. And I hope they find a way to win today, because I think it'll be an entertaining game of put your track shoes on. I think they'll go up and down the floor because Central Florida likes to go at Mach speed. And pun intended here, this team is different whenever they're playing with house money. And that's what is this. That is true. That is so true and so frustrating, Elijah. There's no pressure. You know what? If you go out there and they lost the first game, Husker fans would have said, okay, well, we saw that coming. But they're playing with house money. There's no pressure. There's not that doom coming at the end of the tunnel where, man,
You're on the bubble. I mean, it's just they're playing with house money. They're playing free and they're playing better. And yeah, the money's on the line. I think that's a factor here, but I think it's more that the pressure's off. There's no pressure on this basketball team, and they play differently whenever there's no pressure on them.
You know what? You are spot on. And you know, another thing about it is I think when it's that way and there is no pressure, and I think there was a lot of pressure this whole season. You know, there was kind of a disjointed roster. You didn't know from night to night what you were going to get. Is they have gotten, so they played 3 games in Vegas. Impressive. They have gotten basically something from everyone that's played. Now, Bryce and Juwan get a lot of the headlines. Cale Jacobson should get some of that money they're getting to make sure he buys a lake house in Ashland. But they have gotten something from everyone that has played. I mean, even there have been bits and pieces of Aaron Eulis playing well. So I think you're spot on about, man, when it's kind of like not, okay, you got to win this game to snap a losing streak or win this game to get into the tournament, and you see what happens. They're out there just playing free and easy. And it's kind of enjoyable, you know?
Schmidt, is anybody talking about the Crown down in South Carolina?
Just the well special last night. The
Yeah, that was coming.
So Russ,
what's the update?
Well, I had a putt. I had okay, never mind. We got people in front of us. So no, we I had a
hey, you called us.
No, I know. I was popping in to see if G unit was on yet. But no, I chunked a wedge. I had a shot for a par, and in typical fashion, I'm playing better though. This is a difficult course for normal folks, let alone the hacker that you're listening to right now. So it's interesting. It's super steamy. We haven't ran into any gators, but we're no doubt finding more water than land here.
Hey, those gators are there.
I know they are.
Yeah. So I'm playing in South Carolina one time with a group or on a little South Carolina golf tour, and we're on a tee box, and there's what looks like a faux gator on the tee box, and so one of the guys I'm playing with goes up and whacks it because it's just laying there. It looked like a big plastic alligator or whatever, crocodile. And he whacks it, and all of a sudden the tail moves. And we're like, I mean, we like hightail it into the carts and hit from I think the ladies' tee box. But yeah, there was one right there on the tee box, and it looked like it was fake until somebody hit it, and then it was not fake. And so that was in South Carolina. So look forward to that while you're there.
Well, I was going to ask Schmidt until he went black screen on us. Schmidt, if it comes down to it, which club are you using for self-defense from gators if necessary?
I'm okay.
The Joe Papa special.
The driver?
The driver.
Cool. What's concerning, though, is that if you break it on the gator, you don't have it anymore. That's kind of part of this conversation.
You guys just saw me try and break it. It won't break. So when I was digging that ditch of the last tee box.
I'm using my 4-iron because there's no usage for it for me on the golf course. I can't hit a 4-iron clean. I'm using that.
Sharpie, what about you?
Let's see here. Let me look at this.
He's his bare hands.
No, you know what? So I've only the times I've been playing in Florida, probably like a handful of times we've seen a gator come across the fairway. Yeah. But you got to remember, they don't want anything to do with you unless you start messing with them.
No, I hit it.
Like hitting it with a golf club.
Yeah, that would be wrong. Or shooing them back into the water. Yeah.
A lot of wildlife encounters with Sharpie Tours Florida. I love it.
Hey, the south part of this country has some great golf courses. Like some fantastic golf courses. But you have to put up with the wildlife. Have you seen any lizards? Because the lizards are out.
That sounded good.
That did sound good.
Yeah, it sounded good. He's pissed. It was a situation, sorry fellas, where the Lizards have not made an appearance yet, but we'll see. Hang on a second. I got a little greedy there.
Now watch this drive.
As you can see, Augusta is in tough shape.
Yep. Bill, I tried my best to do some golf announcing. I think it's your turn here to announce this one.
I want to yell at him is what I would like to do in his backswing. I mean, he looks good at this point.
Noonan.
It's a little better. It looks a little right, I think. Yeah, he's dropped another one.
This looks like a nice municipal course in Columbia, South Carolina. You might be in need of some rain.
The instant mulligan.
Yeah.
From Schmidt. First one was right.
Oh, there you go.
Down the middle.
I think he bounced that too.
That's
he did.
Blistered.
He did.
Yeah. So in the chat, you've got let the big dog eat, power fade, and that was a provisional.
Yeah, that was my breakfast ball.
Was that a custom made golf?
So does Nebraska win today? They
Okay.
get Central Florida, fellas. I know you were touching on the crowd earlier. Is it over justice to tap into this better offense because of Cale Jacobson? Is that too much of an overreaction?
I think it's a bit of an overreaction. I think, like Gary was saying earlier, everybody who's got a chance to play is participating, playing at a high level, given the circumstances. Nebraska's made the most of it. Cale Jacobson's making the most of it, right? That's the way I look at it. Some of these teams came in. I mean, Arizona State was ready to pack it in. Who else did Nebraska play in the second round? Georgetown. You know, they that was a formality for them. But I'm with Gary. I thought Boise State might be the toughest date Nebraska would have, because this was a serious thing for Boise State. They were devastated to not be in the tournament. That's a really good team. But Nebraska's gone in with the right attitude. Fred has had the right approach. This is a feel good into what has been a trying season. If they win it, great. If they don't, I think people can look at it and go, you know what? They did Nebraska well. Nobody's left so far. They got the Sanford commitment, and then the Lithuanian guy says yes. So Nebraska basketball is not ending on a great note, but a good note.
Did you guys see it was a leaked like scouting report? It was sitting on one of the clipboards that somebody took a picture of as they were walking by at the Crown, and it was all of Nebraska's players, their numbers. And I know Cale Jacobson's been great this tournament. I don't want to fall victim to the overreaction, because I think Boise State nailed it with theirs. It was Cale Jacobson, and his descriptor was ball mover. But yeah, he's an effort guy. Yeah. Offensively, he's not going to hunt his shot. He's going to find the guy who will hunt his shot. He just allows the offense to play within themselves. I think he's a piece that can play at this level for Nebraska, but he's not a starter. He's not an impact guy for Nebraska. I love what he's put together this tournament. I think he could find a role next year if he chooses to stick around. But it's he's a ball mover offensively. He's a slightly taller version of what Sam Hoiberg was doing a year ago. And I know Sam Hoiberg offensively has come into his own a little bit, but Cale Jacobson, he's going to play effort defensively, fundamentally sound offense, and he's going to get the ball to the shooters, the guys that are going to get in the ball to the hoop.
Yeah, yesterday was one of those days for the first time in Vegas where I think the length bothered Cale. And he wasn't as good as he was in the first two games. But I mean, if you had to pick your final five you want on the floor in crunch time, he's in there. It's either him or Asijan or Sam. Three guys for two spots when you throw Bryce, Jawan, and Morgan in there. I also think they've done a good job with the rotations. I mean, Fred has a handle on when to get guys in and out, but they've gotten contributions from everybody. I mean, I think that's kind of probably how you have to win a tournament like this, is you can't just have Bryce and Jawan carry, every single night. You have to have like a Cale Jacobson show up. The thing about Cale, though, is it becomes like we've kind of started to think about next year, like what his role is going to be like, and what does he want his role to be? Like, does he think he should be starting and wants to play more, or do they have a good communication with him? They say, hey, This is where we see you. You can be a valuable asset next year. This is what your role is going to be, and I don't know that it's going to change. And if he's comfortable with that, then he's going to stay, and they should reward him. But, you know, you never know. Like, is somebody going to watch the Crown and watch him play this week and go, man, I could use a sixth man or a starting one of our starting five playing in the Missouri Valley Conference or something like that.
Shot. What was that, about 290?
And joining us to break down the Crown.
The Crown.
Garth Glissman. Garth, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me, Bill?
We got you, and we are so glad that you're joining us to break down the Crown tournament out in Las Vegas and Nebraska's matchup with UCF. The floor is yours for the next 30 minutes to talk about what we'll see today, or we can also talk about the other tournament going on in San Antonio.
Well, thanks for having me on. Disclaimer at the top, Wi-Fi in my hotel has not been the most reliable thus far. So if I'm a little choppy, please forgive me.
See, not reliable and choppy sound like Schmidt's golf game that we've seen today.
Schmidt, you must know people at important places. You getting to go to all these fancy courses while we're working.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Garth, congratulations on the sweet seats at the Final Four and good airtime the last couple of games. But what was your impression of the level of basketball, not just your teams from the SEC, but just the level of basketball that we saw with the semifinal games last night?
I didn't get to watch much of the second game, to be completely candid. Just all in on my job, being back of house, a unique situation emotionally in that you're congratulating one team on advancing to the national championship game and then consoling another that had their season cut one game shorter than they would have liked. But speaking for the SEC semifinal, we felt like it was a great advertisement for SEC basketball. I think the rest of the country was able to see what I've been seeing for the last 2 years, and that is we play a really fun, fast-paced, exciting brand of basketball, tremendous athleticism. And sometimes at the Final Four, you're playing basketball in a football stadium. The kids are a little nervous. The shots don't fall. Plays a little choppy to start. It was the exact opposite last night. Both teams came out hitting shots early. They were sharp from the start. Auburn scores 46 points in the first half. Florida digs themselves a little bit of a hole and then goes on a run in the second half like they've done so many times throughout the NCAA tournament. So from my perspective, it was a great advertisement for SEC basketball, and hopefully we put on a good show for fans across the country.
Garth, good to have you in, bud. Thanks for making time. It's a bit of an interesting show today. Appreciate Bill and Gary and Elijah getting me in, and thank you for your time. Florida just did enough, man. Last night, I thought their guard play was fantastic, as per usual. Shoot.
Did you just put live while doing an interview?
Yeah. This is amazing.
Same result. But tell me a little bit about Golden, his culture, and just kind of your time around him.
Todd is quickly becoming a household name. He played at St. Mary's, and even though St. Mary's is a bit of a household name for college basketball purists, I have to be honest, I hadn't studied their program that closely, and I got a chance to watch them play against Alabama in the NCAA tournament this year. And watching St. Mary's gave me a better understanding of Todd Golden, because you see with St. Mary's that front line, just the desire to build a roster with incredible length along the front line. And so I think Todd took that from his St. Mary days, and you see that in Florida's front line. They can play with four high-quality bigs. The starting bigs, Ruben Chinule and Alex Condon, and then they bring Tommy Houck, who's arguably the best sixth man in the country, off the bench. He's kind of a do-everything four-man. And Micah Hanlockton, who started at the 5 all year for him last year before suffering an injury in the SEC tournament championship, returned to play in mid-February, and has provided additional depth. So they have tremendous depth, length along the front line. And you saw that start to take a toll on Auburn. Janai Broome, SEC Player of the Year, got off to a really good start. But in the second half, even by Auburn's own admission, you started to see the depth of Florida's front court and the fact that they could run multiple guys at Janai start to wear him down.
Hey, one thing I think we've all talked to you about, and you kind of talked about it publicly, is people are looking at SEC basketball and going, whoa, I mean, this is unprecedented what they have been able to do. How is, in a conference that is so attached to football success, how are quote unquote football schools doing so well in basketball?
It's a rising tide lifting all ships. And forgive me if people have heard me kind of give this explanation before, but the southeastern part of the United States, there's been tremendous economic growth in this part of the country in the last 20 years. In terms of gross domestic product, we're actually the highest producing region in the country, now outpacing the Northeast, which throughout most of American history was the most vibrant region economically. And that has coincided with a run of tremendous success in SEC football. Nick Saban, obviously arriving at Alabama, led the SEC on its latest chapter of dominance in SEC football. And so you have this confluence of factors, a region that is on fire economically, a lot of population shift coming down to the southeastern part of the United States, a lot of success in football, strong leadership at the conference office. So, like I said, a rising tide lifting all ships. And by virtue of all of those factors, combined with increasing enrollment at our schools, which is tied to those other factors that I just mentioned, our schools were really well situated economically to have the resources to reinvest in other aspects of their athletic programs. And so that has led to increased commitment financially and otherwise in SEC basketball. And that manifests itself most clearly in the quality of head coaches that we have in our conference. To be able to attract and retain the best head coaches in college athletics, as you know, it's a very competitive labor market for head coaches. You have to be willing to make a financial commitment. With Todd Golden making the Final Four this year, we have 7 of our 16 head coaches have been to the Final Four. Wow. And so the success of the region, the enrollment trends across all 16 SEC institutions, combined with the football success, has put the SEC in a position of strength. That has allowed our schools to invest in basketball, and you're now starting to see the conference reaping what it started to sow throughout the last decade.
How do you think the upcoming revenue sharing changes the SEC? I mean, there's only so much money to go around for every single school when it comes down to revenue sharing. We know, I mean, I asked this question kind of from a Big Ten point of view, and I want to get your SEC thoughts on it because we know the football still rules the roost in the Big Ten and the SEC. Is that going to change anything once revenue sharing comes about and you have conferences like you look at the Big East? I mean, they really focus on basketball. That's their sport. That's their flagship, if you will. Is that going to change anything moving forward?
And as it relates to revenue sharing, I think the Big Ten and the SEC are most closely aligned in terms of super conferences with schools that have had a lot of success in football. Obviously, it takes a commitment to football to continue to compete at the highest level. And so there's been some discussion lately, Elijah, that basketball programs and conferences like the SEC or the Big Ten might somehow be at a disadvantage because of the money going to other sports, namely football. I think it's much too early to arrive at that conclusion because going forward, student athletes will really receive 2 revenue streams. There'll be the revenue sharing payments that come from the schools, and that will take effect beginning next academic year if the settlement is approved. And there's a court hearing on Monday. We don't expect to get final word on whether it's going to be approved on Monday, but we may get some indications. If the settlement is approved, the revenue sharing agreement will go into effect next year, and so that will be one significant source of payment to student athletes. But there's still this world of outside NIL. And I think that student athletes in the SEC, or for your listeners in Big Ten country, are still going to be very well positioned to do well economically as it relates to outside NIL. So what I would caution anybody that's concerned, that's an SEC basketball fan that thinks, oh no, the Big East is going to be able to spend more money on basketball. Understand that there's going to be, at a basic level, 2 revenue streams going forward, and we ought not focus too much on just one of those revenue streams.
See, and I think that's what a lot of people have lost sight of, is that they hear this, that it's the settlement, which we all expect to be agreed upon. And I think it'd be an upset if it didn't. Then, oh my gosh, the chaos that would ensue. But people are forgetting, these athletes can become private entities and bring in however many endorsement deals or whatever they want, or however many Happy Meals, that we want to go back to the Southwest Conference of the 1970s and 80s, whatever. There's still going to be money flowing into the pockets of the athletes in one way or another. Garth, I guess staying with the politics of the game, and this tournament has been a little bit overshadowed by the transfer portal happening during the course of the season, and Tom Izzo was not happy about it, and he probably voiced a lot of concerns for most of the other coaches. Do you see that being altered by the time? I know ships don't turn around quickly, but is that one where coaches aren't going to have to worry about it until after the tournament and the season is done next year?
That's a great point, Bill. Can you guys still hear me okay? Just want to make sure that the Wi-Fi is holding up on my end.
Yep.
So I've had the privilege to serve on the men's basketball oversight committee, and I've been on that committee for just about a year now. And I've been pleasantly surprised by the opportunity available on that committee to make a positive difference. And of course, I'm just one committee member among a broader group, but I really view my work on the oversight committee as a chance to positively shape college basketball. And so I'm going to have a chance, Bill, to work on the timing of the transfer portal going forward. And I have 2 off-season goals this year with respect to my work and on the oversight committee. One relates to the timing of the transfer portal, and the other is trying to make a better end of game experience for college basketball as it relates to instant replay. We have to reduce the number of instant replays at the end of games to preserve game flow, keep game length at a reasonable level, and then ultimately preserve the overall fan experience. So with respect to your question, the transfer portal, the Final Four, in addition to being a great event for basketball, it's the biggest industry conference, so to speak, of the year for college basketball. So you have a lot of coaches and administrators here, and you're just bumping into them on the street. And so I've had a number of conversations with people on various committees, different policymakers, folks of influence. And every time I see them, I stop them and I say, hey, can we make some progress in the near future with respect to the timing of the transfer portal? For the reason that you mentioned, and that is that this weekend and this week should be a celebration of this season, a celebration of what the teams, players, and coaches have accomplished this season. One of the greatest Final Fours in recent memory, with 4 1 seeds advancing. Incredible games yesterday. We shouldn't be talking about the transfer portal at this point. Yeah. It's a distraction from what should be a celebration. It's also puts the team still playing at an unfair disadvantage, because you want those players and those coaches focused on the task at hand. It's unfair to the 4 coaches who are here at the Final Four to ask them to split their loyalties, one preparing for a Final Four game or a national championship game while also trying to recruit in the transfer portal. So we need to make some changes with respect to the timing, Bill. And based on the conversations that I've had around San Antonio this week, I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to make any bold promises. The reason being, if you think about it, over 360 Division I schools play men's college basketball, and the transfer portal opens after all but 16 of them have been excluded from national championship contention. And so when you think about the politics involved in all of this, and understanding that the NCAA gets a bad rap from time to time, but ultimately the NCAA is just enforcing the rules that have been developed by the membership. So if you're thinking about trying to get to a majority vote, and then you think that only 16 schools are still playing when the transfer portal opened this year, we have to do some persuading to make sure that everyone understands that, hey, even though your season may have ended in the first week of March, that it's better for college basketball as a whole if we can keep the focus on this season, celebrate this season, and then pivot to the off season after we crown a national champion. And I would also add, I think that's the winning argument, hopefully. But I would also add that there's some benefits from an overall marketing and PR standpoint if we move back the transfer portal window later. If you think about the NFL or the NBA, for example, they go through their season in its entirety, they crown their champion, and then they use some of their off-season events, the combine, the draft, free agency. That's additional content in the off-season to try to win mind share from sports fans. Well, now we're sacrificing some of that additional mind share that we could capture from college sports fans, and instead we're cannibalizing our own interest at what should be, as I mentioned, this week of celebration. So to me, it's a no-brainer, Bill, that we would push the transfer portal back. There is a little bit of concern on my part just based on the fact that, over 90% of schools are done playing by the time the transfer portal window opens under the current system. But I'm hopeful that those are arguments, so to speak, that I articulated just now are enough to convince folks to realize that it's in college basketball's best interest to crown a champion and then pivot to the offseason.
Hey, I'm going to jump into your wheelhouse because I know as a former high school basketball coach, you'd like to talk about the players. How about the health of the game on the floor with the way the game is being played? The players, not all the other auxiliary stuff that swirls around the sport, but what's your opinion of the actual game and the players that are playing college basketball right now?
The on-court product this year has been historically strong. And I assume you have some listeners who are absolute college basketball junkies, and then maybe some who are more casuals. Maybe they listen to your program to make sure they're caught up with all the, Husker spring football talk. And trust me, I'm all for spring football talk because that's really the only time that people like you were talking about me as a player, because they definitely weren't talking about me during the fall. You don't typically talk about the third or fourth string quarterback in the fall, but they would talk about me a little bit in the spring. So I'm all for spring football talk. But for those college basketball junkies, they're probably familiar with KenPom, which is the top college basketball analytics site. And KenPom has been around since the 1996-97 season. And the reason I mentioned KenPom is because KenPom assigns a rating, an objective, quantitative rating to every team in every season. They also do that for every conference in every season. I do have to put in a plug for the SEC that our conference rating is the highest of any conference in KenPom history. So forgive me for just sneaking that one in there. But of the top 10 teams in KenPom history, so these are quantitative metrics dating back to 1996-97 when KenPom started, the 4-1 seeds in this year's Final Four all ranked in the top 10 in KenPom history. So if you think about that, in terms of regular season accomplishments, NCAA tournaments accomplishments to dates, KenPom is saying that 4 of the best 10 teams in the last, call it 30 years, are playing in college basketball this year. So then you have to ask the question, why? How did that happen? Should we put any credibility in KenPom's rating system? And the answer is yes. And the reason why there's been such a high level of play this year is because of the NCAA eligibility rulings. You now have a number of 5th and 6th year college players who are playing college basketball. Take Auburn, for example. Janai Broome, 5th year player. Dylan Cardwell, Chad Baker-Mazar. These aren't just seniors. These are guys who have been in college basketball for 5 or more years. Florida, Walter Clayton, Will Richard, Elijah Martin. These are all 4th and 5th year guys. And so the eligibility rules have allowed players to stay in college basketball longer. The NIL rules have incentivized players to stay in college basketball longer because pre-NIL, guys like Janai Broom, Walter Clayton Jr., Mark Sears, they would have had to go to the NBA because it would have been in their financial interests to do so. They could not have justified another year in college and sacrificing on real earnings. But now you have eligibility rules that allows them to stay longer. You have NIL rules that gives them financial incentive to stay longer. And the last piece, Gary, the transfer portal.
Yeah.
So you have older players who are staying longer. They're financially incentivized to stay in college. And then the transfer portal provides them a mechanism to increasingly aggregate among the top teams in the country. And so conferences like the SEC, conferences like the Big Ten, the Big 12, they've gotten stronger at the top because 10 years ago, your 6th or 7th man might have been a developmental player, a freshman or a sophomore. Well, now that 6th or 7th man was the best player in the Patriot League last year, or the best player in the Summit League last year. Gary, I love your work with UNO. You're a great ambassador for UNO basketball. Take Frankie Fiddler.
Yep.
He was a dominant player in the Summit League last year. Dominant. And Frankie's a great player. I think Frankie's going to have a chance to make a lot of money playing professional basketball. Frankie goes to Michigan State. They're an Elite 8 team. And he was a rotational guy for him all year, part-time starter. But when things settled in the tournament, he was, a very good, call it 6th or 7th man for Michigan State. And in an earlier era of college basketball, a player like Frankie Fiddler would not have been able to make that jump. He probably would have stayed at the Summit League. If he wanted to transfer, he had to sit out a year. Yep. So there's a lot of factors at play here. But I think when you look at KenPom and you look at their quantitative metrics and they're saying, yes, this is a historically strong season for college basketball. Yes, the best teams in college basketball this year are historically strong. And then you ask the why, and there's clear explanations for the why. It's the eligibility rules, it's the NIL, and then the transfer portal. What's interesting, Gary, is that at least one of the legs of that 3-pronged stool that I just laid out for you is scheduled to go away in the next few years because that COVID rule will sunset out.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with respect to eligibility rules, but NIL and the transfer portal appear to be here to stay.
Garth will wrap, brother, and forgive me for the in and out here, but you're the best for joining us. Initial thought on Monday night, your take on Florida, Houston, from a matchup perspective, not a prediction perspective.
Well, obviously, I'm rooting for Florida. Predicting a Florida win. I say that obviously with my SEC bias. I fully own that. I will say I have tremendous respect for Houston. I got a chance to see Houston play live in the Elite 8 against Tennessee. That was obviously a good win for Houston, a tough day for the SEC. And I got to see parts of them live yesterday, not too much because I was in the back with our teams. And then caught the end of that game on TV. They are an incredibly tough-minded and physically tough team. I think being completely transparent, Houston is a more favorable matchup for Florida than Duke. Duke, I think, presents some unique matchup challenges just because of Cooper Flagg's size and athleticism and ability to play on the ball as a primary ball handler and facilitator. And so I think there could have been some challenges with respect to how Florida would guard Cooper Flagg within the context of their normal lineups and rotations. So from a matchup standpoint, I think that Florida matches up more favorably with Houston than Duke. But again, I watched Houston take apart a really, really good SEC team in the Elite 8. And I think what was evident to me, as I said, is just their culture, their toughness. You saw it last night. You never can count them out. And they will bring the fight to Florida on Monday night. And I think Florida if they're hitting shots from the outside, if Walter Clayton can continue to play at the high level that he's been playing, and if you can see some other Florida players step up and hit some shots, I think they have a really good chance. But they'll need to make shots because Houston will defend. They'll try to slow the game down. They'll try to make it a half-court game. They'll try to muddy it up, so to speak. And so Florida is going to want to get out, make it more of an up-and-down game. And to do that, they'll need to hit some shots, create some turnovers, and take advantage of opportunities to get up and down and increase tempo when those opportunities present themselves.
Garth Glissman with us here on the Average Joe Sports Show Sunday Live. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, and basketball commissioner for the SEC, Garth Glissman, joining us. Garth, it's awesome, man. You are so great at making time. We've done a number of Final Four shows over the years, and thanks for coming through again, man, and breaking it down. Continued success to you, and best to you and your family. Thanks for jumping on.
Hey, let's keep the tradition going for many more Final Fours to come. How about we make that pact right here, right now?
Deal.
Sounds good.
Done. Thanks, Garth.
Appreciate
Thank you all.
you.
Great to
Thanks,
see
man.
you guys.
See you, bud. Guys, you're awesome. Thanks for putting up with this.
I feel like I just went to like a master, a graduate level class. I mean, my God, that just brilliance. You know, everything that he knows and how tight in he is. And look, and all of that's born out of having been on the Average Joe Sports Show years ago. So we know the influence that we have on the college games, but it's great to hear it from him.
Absolutely. And what a dude, right? Not only quarterback at Nebraska, hoopster at Nebraska, the pride of Waverly, but NBA 6+ years with the association and just rocking and rolling in the SEC. SEC country is flat out gorgeous. It is really, really pretty down here, South Carolina border of North Carolina. North Carolina's a fun state to visit as well. But guys, appreciate you guys for letting me jump on and again dealing with the in and out here. So
all good. Schmidt,
well,
how's the round going?
It'll be better now that I'm not trying to do two things at once. That's what I'm going to blame it on.
Thanks, Schmidt.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
See you, bud. All right, we should probably turn our attention at what Matt Rule had to say yesterday, since he said it, so we could talk about it today.
A lot of people in the stream asking for insight on the Hardley Gilmore situation. That was the main news coming out of yesterday.
So he, one of the things at Kentucky, now remember, he's young. He's 17. So he was young at Kentucky, and he had some immaturity issues, and they were well documented at Kentucky. And they thought that a change of scenery with his position coach, who has helped him. And I just think he's a young kid. And the immaturity, they aren't messing around with people that don't do the right things this year. They dinged some guys during winter conditioning as a team suspension, and I think they want to keep the train moving. So it's unfortunate because we thought his upside, he was going to find a way to get into the rotation, but man, you just can't be a knucklehead. And they didn't waste any time, and they moved on from him. And it's fortunately you're in a wide receiver room that's deep, that you have a lot of competition there, and by losing one guy doesn't mean the whole room's going to go down. But it was a swift action, it appeared, by Matt Rule.
Yeah, and without diving too deeply into it, because I don't want to speak on things I don't truly know, but from everything I've heard, it's as simple as once you lose the trust of everyone in that locker room, it's really, 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 really difficult to gain that trust back. And I would go as far as say you're not going to gain that trust back. So I think that's kind of a situation here is you screw up off the field, you lose the trust of the locker room, and there was no interest in having a guy like that back inside the locker room.
And Kobe mentions in the stream that perhaps opens the door back up for Demetrius Bell, who lost all of last season because of injury. Look, it's a message sender, and for some of these young players who, been the stars on their high school team and they've gotten all the press, and perhaps, maybe there've been some incidents where in high school you got away with it because you had to have them around and there were no ramifications, no repercussions, no consequences. College is a little bit different. And at 105, that's a fine line. Like Elijah mentions, you lose trust, or it could be within the locker room. It could be with the coaches who's, if you're reading the rules in gray and not in black and white, and there's a lot more competition in the college locker room than there is in the high school locker room, or perhaps what there was at Kentucky. You have got to be careful. And I know they really liked him. Very, very talented young player, very young, and may have made a youthful mistake. But boy, when you got to go down to 105 and you need to also send a message to the rest of the locker room, I'm sure that this is part of it too. Look, we're not messing around. This is a corporation, and we do have a hard 105 that we've got to get to. And this room that you're in, there's a lot of competition, and
they weren't looking to move on from him, but his actions made it easy to move on. That wide receiver room, you bring up Bell, who is just a freak physically, that we just need to get on the field to see what we have. That wide receiver room is loaded, and I love the competition there. Again, that will also open up for, more opportunities for a Mosey, as well, and a Mills. So it's an exciting time for the wide receivers, but they have, one, Elijah, you're spot on about trust, because they have preached being a good teammate. Okay. That everybody needs everybody, but they're also not putting up with BS. This is year number 3. I don't care if you're new or a returning player, what we expect of you. And we're not looking to move on from you, but if you make the decision easy on us, then you're in a gots to go situation. So disappointing, because I really wanted to see him play, but he's got to grow up a little bit. He's got to understand within the framework of a team what it means to be a good teammate.
And if there is a positive to take away from this situation, which might not be the right word, but you hear where I'm going with this, it's that you have built a room in such a way this offseason where you have the ability to say, you know what, you screwed up. We got other guys in this room that we trust just as much as you. Hey, we loved your potential. We brought you in here because we thought you could be really good, but we still have a room that you don't have to put up with that because you need the talent. And that's why I think you are in this situation, is you like the guys that are in that room now, and you're going to look at a guy who's very talented but screws up off the field and say, you know what, we're gonna roll with the guys that are as talented, that do it the right way on the field. That's the positive that you can take away from this, is that it's a credit to how they built that wide receiver room this offseason, that this isn't a massive deal saying, oh man, what are we going to do now? You have guys in that room that you trust.
Don't you think there's maybe a little insight as well, as they get into the third year, and there's quite a few guys that have been here for 3 years or 2 years, that they self-police themselves. Hey, the coaches really don't have to make a decision, because his teammates have lost trust in him for inaction. And when that happens, you're in a gots-to-go situation. So it's not us stepping in or us making a decision of, okay, let's see if we can sue this over because we really need him to play. Mm-hmm. I mean, you send a message there. Hey, they are all business. Winning is the thing this year. And they're not going to allow anything to get in the way of winning. No drama. You're going to be a core group of 105, and this is how we're going to roll. And this has become Matt Rule's football program. It's not, hey, there's things there's PTSD. It's his football program.
And if he is giving ownership to the players, that harkens back when Nebraska had the Unity Council that Jack Stark implemented back in the 90s, right around the same time as the run. That was not lip service. That was very much inner accountability with the players. And I remember I was working Husker Vision at the time doing Tom's show, and we talked to Jack and said, we'd love to go in and do a story on what this is all about. And we went to a couple of Unity Council meetings, and I had to get clearance from the players to let us go in there. And then to watch, I can't think of I remember Phil Ellis, linebacker, was addressing something because there were some classes that had been missed, and some accountability issues with some of the younger players. And it wasn't a coach in there. It wasn't Jack in there. It was the players. And there was a total accountability that they gave the players. And if Matt Rule is doing that for not just Dylan Raiola and his his quarterback room and his receivers, but if there are others who are given that kind of accountability, and they're the ones who are going to Matt Rule and company saying this is not acceptable, with amongst us, that's a healthy sign. That as Rule said yesterday in his press conference, they talk about this being my team or my program. Well, maybe that was the case in year one, but by the time you get to year three, he's just, the guy who's the CEO of everything, but he can trust coaches, can trust players. There have been players who've been around long enough who got a chance to watch Ty Robinson lead the last couple of years. I think that's a really big deal, and it's a healthy thing if they are having their own internal accountability that's not left up to the principal in the nice office.
Yeah, and and then there's another part of that wide receiver room. It's kind of, we expected this because you looked at what he did at Kentucky, and I'm talking about Dane Key now. When he gets to Nebraska, everything you hear since Dane Key showed up and now that they're into pads and spring ball is that room needed a guy that is there to become a pro and carries himself like a pro. So does the work that is needed to become a pro down the line. And there's a lot of guys that are following his lead. Like every rep, you don't cut off a 10-yard out 8 yards. You run it 10 yards. And I think that's going to have a big impact because it is a relatively young wide receiver room. He's at the top where he's got SEC experience, and then Hunter's got experience playing in the ACC with Cal. But I think they need, when Trey Palmer was here, Trey Palmer carried himself like a pro. Okay, his whole goal was to get to the NFL. And so guys watched him, and so guys tried to mimic his daily habits on what he did in his craft to get better. And so trying to emulate him. Now that wide receiver room has got somebody back at the top of the ladder that they can go, okay, this guy's trying to get the NFL. That's where I want to go. What does he do every single day? Well, he shows up on time. He stays extra. He doesn't take shortcuts. And I think that'll benefit that room really well. And then you factor in, they got 2 really good position coaches that came from Kentucky. So they're in a good spot with wide receivers. And I think they're going to be able to keep that, even when Key's eligibility is over after this year, they're going to be able to keep that going. And so you just pass the baton down. I think when Palmer moved on, nobody was ready to grab that baton. And then they had the change where you got a different young position coach who probably got walked over by some of the older guys in that room.
Don't you think, too, that they're hoping that they get out of Dane Key a little bit more of what they were hoping to get from Jamal Banks a year ago? Jamal Banks was so impressive when he came in from Wake Forest, met the media, had a great presence in the room, had a couple of good games. Kind of reminds me, I mentioned O'Shawn Mathis the other day at the, rush, the rush in position. Like, this guy's going to be a game changer, and had a couple of nice games. And I think the same could be said about Banks. That was nice player, had a couple of big catches, really made Dylan look good in the first couple of games of the year, but wasn't that difference maker that Palmer was throughout his entire senior season at Nebraska. That maybe Dane Key is like, okay, this is the guy. We've got your coach. The quarterback's a little more experienced now. You are the leader of this room. You don't have to carry the quarterback, so to speak. But I just get the sense that Dane Key is the kind of guy that they were hoping they had in Banks, but they just get a little bit more.
Well, I think the insight is Hunter gets recruited in the portal from Cal. One of the first things he says publicly is about blocking, not about catching the football, but blocking.
Yeah.
And that's Nebraska wasn't good on the edge with blocking until later in the year.
It's just a wide receiver room that feels more mature. That's just the right way. It feels like, and that's not speaking as much in the immaturity of last year, just a room that feels like they know what it takes and they know what they have to do to go out and win football games. It feels like, just, again, maturity is the word I come back to with that wide receiver room this year compared to last year. Not to say last year's room was immature. I think it more comes down to coaching, but this year is just a group that feels like, I don't want to say if they didn't have a coach, they'd still be fine, but it kind of like with that leader at the top they have in Dane Key, maturity is the word I would use to describe that room. Yeah,
and they still have a young coach, but he's just not as young as the last coach. So there may be a little bit more authority in there, and not just somebody who's, handing out the orange slices or something during during practice.
Well, I think, don't you guys also think it, and I think Garrett's a good football mind. I would have rather seen him be a quarterback coach than a wide receiver coach. But the fact that DeKale Shorts was basically handpicked by Dana Holgerson, I think that wakes you up in that room. Like, oh, there's something about him that our OC sees. And also, if our OC is handpicking our wide receiver coach, I'm not going to screw around. That guy's the real deal. You want the football, you don't mess with the OC's handpicked guy.
Mm.
Hey, I got a quick question before we say goodbye here. Steven posted this yesterday on Twitter. Do you feel differently with Matt Rule compared to Bill Callahan going into year 3, realizing that Elijah is probably too young for this question?
I would say,
and you could throw all of the coaches since Solich year 3, but Steven's question is specifically about Callahan.
No, Steven's got a good question, because if you go back over the history of, like, Solich all the way through to Frost, year 3 is kind of that show your cards year, where there's always that optimism of year number 3 of, even Riley going into year number 3 off of the 16th season. You're like, okay, this is the breakthrough year. Year 3 is kind of show your cards. My only, and we'll get into this as we move along. My only hesitation in making a declaration on this season is I got to see that offensive line. If there's still some unsettled in the offensive line, there's some pieces to like, but I'd like to see them together to go, okay, this feels like an 8 or 9 win team. I think the vibe is better because of the guy at the top. I think you have more trust in Matt Rule year 3 than maybe did with Callahan, even though maybe that year 3 roster under Callahan was better depth-wise than this roster, or you knew more about the players going into year 3 than maybe about Rule's year 3 team.
Year 3 is just the year where if the fan base isn't fully bought in yet, that's the year where you lose the fan base, right? And that's what's unique about year 3. Matt Rule's always made it work in year 3. If you don't, year 3's, hey, there hasn't been enough. I think a lot of Husker fans really like what Matt Rule's put together, but you got to see it translate into a season that is relevant. And I'm talking in the national landscape of college football. It doesn't mean it has to be a college football playoff, but you have to be at least somewhat relevant in college football. If it's not, this is the year where you lose the fan base. And Steven is right. The year 3 under Callahan, I was not old enough to be analyzing football and analyzing coaching hires in that way. I think I was 5. So apologies there. But year 3 is just, hey, if you're going to lose a fan base, it tends to happen in year 3.
I look at it and think we are light years away from what college football was even just 20 years ago. I look at it structurally. The leadership at that time above Bill Callahan was disastrous. And now I think you've got, even though Dannon is new, I think you've got a solid guy at the top. Now, you got the general managers and all this, and maybe, who knows if there are too many cooks in that kitchen. But I think structurally, Nebraska's in a much better place in terms of the leadership over the entire department and the football program. And I think you'll also have a guy now. Look, for Matt Rule, his roots aren't here, but it does seem like he has sold himself, that he has bought into the job that he has, and it's a job that he studied and a job that he wanted. For Bill Callahan, as great of an offensive line coach as he is, his reputation is, this was a job that came shortly after he got whacked by the Raiders. He wanted a job. It was a rushed marriage. I never got the sense that this was the job he wanted. It was a job that he got, and there was no long-term. Yeah. There were no roots planted. So to that end, I look at it that way, not so much the personnel on the field, but I think the roots are in place for there to be a foundation for success. Whereas back then, it just seemed like that thing was a house of cards ready to collapse, and eventually it did. Pelini, I think, if you go back to, he had some roots here as a defensive coordinator. He knew what he was getting into. He had Tom for an athletic director. The Eichhorst Riley thing was, I think people were blindsided the entire time that Mike Riley was here. How did this happen? And then Riley was gone. It was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Right. So that just structurally, I think Matt Rule's in a better place because I think this is a job that he wants.
Well, and I think there's another thing about not just Matt Rule decision making is you look at, that Callahan's third year with Zach Taylor. I mean, it was an Adam Carricker led defense. I think they were top 25. They won 9 games that year. But you had questions about the on-field maybe staff members. He had some guys that could recruit. I mean, Callahan's staff could recruit when he was here. But you look at, you were too loyal to Cosgrove as that defense got poor. You look at Frost. Was he too loyal to some assistants? The one thing that gives me like some insight is you can't if you like what you have and you know what the goal is, you can't let the grass grow under your feet. And so if you have to make that tough decision as a CEO to move on from a coach, whether he's been here a year or two, you have to be able to do it. And so we haven't really seen this much quote unquote upheaval with a Nebraska coaching staff going into year 3 than we've seen here. Probably if you went back, Frank probably out of loyalty waited too long to make some changes on his coaching staff with guys that were under Coach Osborne and now we're working for Coach Solich. And it probably hurt him in the end. I think Rule didn't waste any time. He knew he had to fix some things. Now he had some departures where Tony takes the DC job at Florida State, but it's, you can't say, okay, hey, please don't leave. You say, okay, we got to move you out. But then it's what you do as your next hire. And I really like, he made a smart hire in getting Phil Snow. He basically hired a head coach of his offense, similarly a head coach of his defense, even though I think Butler and Rule look at the world of defense differently, but somehow they mesh together. And then you look at the guys on the defensive side of the ball. I think the defensive backs at Nebraska, this will be the best coaching they've gotten in their 3 years with the combo of Addison Williams and Phil Snow.
That could be a good place for us to wrap a Sunday live edition of the Average Joe Sports Show. We've crossed 90 minutes here, and it's a long Average Joe show.
I thought we were tailgate to tip off with the Crown.
We could another 4 hours. We're rocking and rolling here. But I do want to say, Gary, I know you got some Can't Miss Radio coming on a Monday. Let the people know. Correct, Gary? You have some Can't Miss stuff coming tomorrow?
Oh, we lost him.
We lost Gary. Well, I know he's got the return of Jacob Bigelow on a Monday,
come on,
a Monday Gary and Matt show. He was excited for that. So,
Yeah.
Bill, pleasure having you.
All right.
It's Elijah Herbel signing off from a Sunday live edition of the Average Joe Sports Show. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Justice Rhodey and myself, 4 to 6. And then Schmidt makes his return likely on a Tuesday, barring any flight delays. So that's the plan coming up over the next couple days. Thank you for tuning in. Gary's back.
All right. Bad internet.
Gary, I was going to say, you have some Can't Miss Radio coming on a Monday.
Yes. We'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So
break down the Crown. Breaking down the Crown. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not going to make a
Enjoy
prediction.
Sunday.
I made a prediction once and it went really wrong.
I feel good. I feel good about Nebraska and the Scott Frost Bowl here. Nebraska v. UCF.
How do you think how soon into the game will Gus make a reference?
Oh, pretty early.
That might be the only prep he's done.
On that note.
On that note, that'll do it for us. Check out Gary and Matt tomorrow morning. Check out the Average Joe Sports Show with Justice Rhodey and myself tomorrow from 4 to 6. And we'll talk to you again at live next weekend, the Saturday morning edition and the Sunday live. Thanks for tuning in.